Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time. We were talking about your Climate Week schedule backstage. It's a little insane, like almost everybody in this room. But for people who are not familiar with the New York Climate Exchange, maybe you could talk a little bit about what it is, what the mission is, and I think we've got some slides as well.
Sure,
People can see what it looks like.
There we go. We'll start with that one. It's an idea. How many of you know Governor's Island? I saw that there were a lot of people who were from out of town. But Governor's Island, it's this island right off the southern tip of Manhattan, former military installation for a couple hundred years. Several years ago, the city of New York had a vision to create a center for climate solutions. There was already a public high school on the island that had a strong marine focus. There were already environmental groups on the island focused on green workforce activities, focused on composting, focused on farming, focused on arts and culture, but that had a very strong environmental intent. What it was missing was a larger gathering space, a place where research could really become an active part of it, where entrepreneurship could become an active part of it, and then to create spaces like this, where we can have deep conversations, not just among those of us who opt in on a regular basis, but to try and create welcoming spaces that even the accidental visitor, the folks who get off that ferry and wander through our campus, will be engaged in meaningful ways, either by the architecture. It will be the largest mass timber construction ever built in New York City. It will be the largest solar canopy constructed in New York City. It will have exhibition spaces where, again, entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists can present, display the work that they do on a regular basis. It's intended to be this hub, this center for climate solutions that serves New York, but it also serves the world, particularly when you've got Climate Week and you've got the world coming to New York. We can capitalize on that. The thing I always say, though, is we're not just going to get people during Climate Week. It was Fashion Week last week. It was the US Open a few weeks ago. We want to capitalize on all of the reasons why people come to New York and use that access to help begin to broaden the conversation about climate. I love what Miranda was saying about how we're trying to engage people who might not otherwise have been engaged. And that is really important to us at the Exchange.
So when we were talking, preparing for this, you said it's really about getting the right people working side by side. And the proximity was the thing that you wanted to take advantage of. Almost, you have we're used to working remotely now, but you think there's something really valuable in having the right people working side by side. Who are those right people, and what does proximity make happen?
So let me again add to some of the imagery of what the Exchange is. This is when you get off the boat, you're walking into the campus. We're going to have a very large conference facility that can be converted into multiple different functions. We'll have the ability, in future Climate Weeks, we'll have the ability to have 20 or 30 events going on at the same time at the same place. And that will change the dynamic of kind of come spend the day on the island and really deeply engage with topics that vary widely. Again, the intent is to ensure that we're engaging the broader community through the work that we're doing, through this is the kind of space that we're, again, creating an open, welcoming environment so people can walk into the laboratory, they can walk into the engineering space and see what the entrepreneurs are trying to do differently. And now, imagine you're having a conversation about climate, and you have ready access to that expertise, the innovator, the researcher, the academic, the policymaker, the financier. Again, look what is behind Governor's Island, access to Wall Street, up the river, the diplomatic community. Our goal is to bring that together in a place that's a little bit removed, a very different vibe than being in Manhattan. You come to the island, your temperature comes down a bit, your mind opens up a bit. We want to capitalize on that and create that space where, again, if you put that community together, you can have conversations that sound different because you have ready access to different kinds of information than you might otherwise have had.
So give me a typical project. Like, how would this look in action? Have you had any interactions already that can serve as a template for the future? But what are the projects that are going to move forward here?
So imagine you've got access to 11 universities, and it's not just New York-based universities. So SUNY Stony Brook is our anchor institution, but locally I've got NYU, Pace University, Pratt Institute, SUNY Maritime. Upstate I've got the Rochester Institute of Technology. I've got out west University of Washington. I've got Duke. I've got Georgia Tech, and I've got Oxford. That's a lot of bandwidth. And you can focus on the logos of those schools, but I also like to think of it as it's 9 engineering schools, it's 8 business schools, it's 6 policy schools, 5 schools of communication. Again, resources, bandwidth, that when you begin to think about approaching things in an interdisciplinary way, and that's going to be central to what we do, that's foundational to how we want to have conversations about solutions. But it also is the engagement of not just those universities. I've got major corporations and I've got community organizations ranging from the Climate Museum. We want to be working with Meredith and the Department of Education. We want to be engaging the local chambers of commerce. They are our partners as well. Labor unions, workforce development groups. The conversations, they sound different when you get all of those folks in the room, but it also grounds it in the different realities. So we've been working on a battery project, not just on what's the newest, latest, greatest battery technology. We were focused on, I started my career in New York. I was working on a different island at the Fresh Kills landfill out in Staten Island. New York City generates a lot of stuff that we throw away. Eventually, we're going to be having to navigate a large quantity of electric vehicle batteries. Those are very usable assets, but there's very little processing capacity right now to find a secondary use, a second life for them. We started a conversation with folks about how could you turn this asset into a valuable asset that others can make use of. Well, that means you end up trying to talk to entrepreneurs. That means you end up talking to the buildings department, the fire department, who are going to be very concerned about, can you redeploy this in a safe way? You've got supply chain issues. You've got the researchers who are saying, well, maybe the generational changes in battery chemistry, how are you going to navigate that? All of that together takes a very complex system, and you begin to break it down into, there are different issues we're going to need to work on. And I can get people who are sitting at the table for this conversation, but they're also listening closely to this conversation because they recognize it has value for people who live in the community who can get jobs out of it.
So that's a great project. How do you then take those results, which sounds like an academic finding, and we talked about this, that a lot of the academics you work with is that you'll succeed if you change how they work, if you change how they create their results. So now you've got a result of like, we've got a plan for what to do with these batteries. How do you make it real? So one of the problems is that research, getting it out of the laboratory into practice on the ground in different places, can be really challenging. They don't have access, they don't know how to pitch. That's a real serious problem. But they don't know the policy environment, they don't know how to get stuff paid for beyond, not just their research, but if I'm building this and if I'm trying to turn this into a business, who's going to invest? What are the issues I need to focus on? We're building that community that they can engage with. We are engaging cities, not just New York City, cities around the world. We're hosting an event in Midtown today for a group called Climate Mayors. That is dozens of mayors who are focused on these kinds of issues on a regular basis. We work with them. We work with the Global Covenant of Mayors, which is 3,500 cities around the world. We work with the C40, 100 cities around the world. We can tap into these networks that already exist. At the end of the day, what the exchange tries to do is be value add to all of the institutions, all of the activities that already exist, recognizing that we don't need one more group to put out a publication. That's being done, thank you very much, but let's turn that into a solution that's working on the ground, that is putting people to work, that is getting the financing, and is now turning into an idea that is being replicated again and again and again. Talk a little bit about I think it's Georgia Tech project that's using AI to do some flood analysis, but also to engage the community in a way that they've probably never been engaged before.
So again, this is one of the things that we're really trying to champion, taking the theory, taking the innovations coming from some of the great thinkers on these issues, but putting it in the hands of people on the ground. So we're looking at a project that will be deployed both as a pilot, both here and in coastal Georgia, where it's a new way of envisioning flood impacts in coastal communities. But we're just not, again, treating it as a research exercise. We're going to be reaching out to community organizations around the Jamaica Bay area, where flooding is a consistent problem. We are going to be going to religious organizations. We already have community partners who can convene people. We put the tools, a very user-friendly version of this tool, in the hands of the public and help them understand you have different options that could be pursued to try and reduce flooding levels in your neighborhood. Here are the cost implications. Here are the implications for you as the homeowner, for you as the renter. What do you think makes sense? What would you advocate? What information would you like to take? And then so you can go to your city council member, you can go to your community board, talk about what they can do. Again, empower the community, but give them access to amazing tools that'll enable that and turn that into movement, action.
What are some of the things that you've been working with this sort of interdisciplinary teams for a while now? What are some of the surprises? Are there any breakthroughs or just things that were unexpected that came through these types of interactions that probably wouldn't have happened if everybody was working in their silos?
Well, I think the good news, I'm a former academic. Before I was at the World Bank right before I came back to New York, but I was at MIT and I was at Columbia before that, very siloed. The thing that was really interesting when I started visiting all our partners was that interdisciplinary departments or initiatives had popped up at virtually all the academic institutions. Being able to link to that has been really important. One of the things that we really have found great appetite for in many of the projects, again, I ran through that litany of engineers or policy folks or law schools or finance experts. The thing that we often circle back to is, can you tell me about those communication schools that you have as partners? Because there's just this broad recognition that we're not reaching as many people or the right people in the right way. And so being able to integrate that kind of expertise, being able to train youth, being able to train community representatives, being able to train our partners so that they think about who the audience is and how they can talk to them in a way that's really going to move them. You know, Miranda was talking about we're trying to engage people emotionally. Engineers, entrepreneurs also need to engage people emotionally, and you can do that through different types of communication techniques. And we're really trying to bring that into a lot of our programming.
What about the business community in terms of, it seems like this is a great academic resource, great knowledge, great research capabilities. How can the business community tap into that, partner with you, and then turn it into profitable projects?
So IBM, Moody's, and BCG are my three corporate partners. And they bring a really different perspective than the Brooklyn or the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, right? They're thinking about how to scale some of these ideas globally. They are extraordinarily rich in terms of ideas, expertise, experience that they're constantly bringing to us. They also help us think very practically about how this is going to play. The finance conversation is going to be a critical one for us. Again, New York is a financial capital. How do we access Wall Street? But what are the questions we're trying to solve? Is it, so again, I was at the World Bank and we always talked about billions to trillions in terms of trying to elevate increase the amount of resources that are flowing on the ground. That doesn't fit with the conversation in, again, pick a borough, pick a building owner who's trying to navigate a local law that says thou shalt decarbonize by X date. Well, how do you, in an era of high interest rates, how do you create a retail product that actually suits the needs of that particular type of real estate developer or owner? Is that going to be the same for a Class A office building in Manhattan versus a mom and pop developer on Grand Course in the Bronx? Very different realities. We're trying to use the expertise and the access to financial expertise in Wall Street to turn that into, again, actions, solutions that fit these different circumstances on the ground.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're scaling from, multinational companies and organizations that are trying to find huge ideas that'll scale across the entire planet to the local union leader who's just looking to fill jobs for his union, to local landowners that are, both renters and landlords that are also just trying to live and get by, tying all these and then connecting them to the academics at the same time. There's just so much opportunities for some real progress there. Stephen, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Let's give him the ground.